My name is Nick B, and let's get into this week's futures overview. So, starting with the Forex economic calendar, Monday we don't have too much going on. Waller speaks, but that's not the main show. Tuesday, red label consumer confidence at 10 a.m. Wednesday, nothing's really going on. Thursday, we have final GDP at 8:30 a.m. That's going to be interesting, along with unemployment claims. And then at 10 a.m., there's pending home sales. And Friday, we have core PCE price index and revised consumer sentiment. Okay, so it's going to be a fairly calm week overall. Let's take a look at the swings that we've been in. So we opened up with a little bit of a limit up. Let's go to the classic 2-year. Let me clean this up. Okay. All right, starting from the basics, what do we know? All right, we know that we are bullish. We're going higher. Okay. What floors did we make from last week into this week? What needs to break in order for us to go higher or lower? Well, based on the contract rollover from last week, we kind of can assume that the base support right now is 54.90 on ES, and the resistance is 55.88 on to the upside. With that said, above 55.88, you can most definitely begin taking aim at 5600 as the upside target. And then because we're in new price discovery areas, it's going to be new highs. Again, if we go that direction, we'll be looking at ES in increments of 20 points. So once we get to the target of 5600, we'll be looking at 5620, 5640, 5660 until we kind of slow down again. Again, that's a little bit of excited price prediction. But with that said, we can't be ignorant to the downside. If we do get a breakdown of 54.90, especially if that daily candle closes us below 54.90, it's very possible we just come back to retest a few of the breakouts that we had. The first target for me to the downside would be the 20-day EMA over at 54.22. And this is where I'm going to have to break this down to the 4-hour to kind of identify what floors did we carve on the way up. Okay, with that said, as always, I'm going to plot out the most obvious answers. Above 55.88, we're going higher. Below 54.90, we're going lower. We can already see on the 4-hour that we're battling it out with the 20-day. In most cases, if the 4-hour keeps us below the 20-day, we're going to be exposed to more downside towards 54.90, 5500 really. And then again, a break of 54.90, especially if we close below that level on the daily, that's going to open us up to not just I'm looking at the EMAs, but I'm looking at the previous higher low that we made over at 5400. So 54.90 breaks, it can be assumed that 5400 could be that next bottom line support that we retest. Below 5400, we're exposed down towards 53.35 again, which were previous all-time highs. And then below that, we can assume 5300, below 5300, up to 5250. But again, that is a bit of ways away. It's the same as assuming we're going to see 5650 into this week. It's an either or scenario. End of the day, we're going to have to wait to see what breaks out or breaks down. I can break this down to the 1-hour. I can break this down a little bit to the intraday, but it does not matter because the fact is either above 55.88 we go higher or below 54.90 we're going to go lower. Everything here, we're just timing. We're just playing with fire. So even if I break this down to the 1-hour, what am I identifying really? I mean, I see these lower lows, lower high, lower low, lower high. I see it, but I can't quite rely on it. We're going to take stabs throughout the week signal side, but in terms of direction, understand that this is not, this isn't sustainable areas to pinpoint where we're going to go. With that said, let's move on to NQ. Again, I'm looking for the general direction that where are we going to go based on what breaks out of what. Same thing. We're going to go on the daily 2-year, just my preference. And similar with the yes, we're just going to identify what floor are we in between. And since the gap up that we had last week, 19,900, we actually came very close to 19,900 last week, but ended up bouncing off of it and clearing 20,000 into the close. With that said, I'm going to put my resistance at 20,371 because again, I know if and when we break above 20,371, we're going to probably begin taking aim at 20,400, 20,450, but really my eye would be on 20,500. That would probably be the next pivot point in terms of price either going higher or we get a little bit of a rejection there and we retest a few of the resistance levels that we broke out of to the upside. If we break below 19,900, which was the rollover floor from last week, we can assume that similar to ES, we might end up towards our 20-day EMA, and for me on NQ, that is 19,425. Seems like a stretch. Seems like a big stretch. So I'm gonna have to break this down to the 4 hour to get a better idea of what's going on here. Okay, so 4 hour here in comparison to ES, we're clean below the 20-day on the 4 hour. Assuming that we stay below there, we could end up breaking below 19,900. And again, that exposes us not just to the EMAs, and that's not something I want to directly rely on, but I understand that we made a higher low right here of 19,500. And at the very least, if we cannot reclaim 19,900 this week, if we are to break below it, we're probably going to head and end up towards 19,500. Below 19,005 exposes us to 19,000, really 250. Below 19,250 brings us all the way down towards 19,000. And these targets are based on what the previous higher lows were because we had beautiful higher highs, higher lows where we had beautiful breakouts, but if you take a look also on the smaller scale, most of these breakouts did not break out. Did not get a clean retest. So the assumption is we're going to wait for those retests. It may or may not come, but the worst thing I figured throughout the weeks as we keep making higher highs and higher lows, the worst thing to do is try to time when we're going to end up at these higher lows. So with that said, based on the information that we have in front of us, it's going to be a game of either or. Are we going to break below 19.9 and get an opportunity to capitalize towards 19.5? Or are we going to have a nice slow grind back up towards 20,370? And if and when we break above that resistance level, we're going to go higher. Same thing with ES. As long as price is in between this floor, I understand it's a couple hundred points and I understand it might be painful to let it go, but understand your probabilities are 50-50. It's a matter of either or. Again, a lot of guys are trying to time the top here. And then some guys are fearful that this is going to continue. So this is an interesting area we're at. What is going to bring us over the top? Not exactly the strongest catalyst, this week aside from really GDP, but even then, it doesn't matter because what is price action going to do? Are we going to break down or break out? So that's what we're looking at NQ. And again, I can break this down to the 1 hour and I could show you that maybe if and when we can get above 20,097, well, excuse me, 20,087, really, I would like to go long at 20,100, targeting the highs back up towards 20,350. Really, if I'm honest, with a stop at 20,080. But I understand that it's very enticing. It looks kind of too easy, and it's 50-50 odds. Do I really want to take that on? So, depending on momentum, depending on how the day goes, how the week unfolds, let's see. Let's see how Monday's open treats us. Let's see which direction we take on. I know that there were some concerns over the dollar too. Let's see right here what happened last week. So we had a bit of a spike on there. Yes, we got above how high? All right, so we didn't pierce 106. We might be heading up there if we continue to hold 105.67, but at the same time, I think the higher we're going to head up in the dollar, the quicker the Fed is going to want to respond with a rate cut. And again, in turn, that's going to show some alleviation at some point. So if we are, again, even gearing towards a dip on equities, that's okay. The assumption is it's not going to be a long lasting dip. Just be careful with that. Like the famous saying is, don't try to catch a falling knife. With that said, that is all she wrote. Let's see what unfolds into this week. Either or, are we going to retake the midpoints on futures? Similar, real quick, let me go over 20,100 is the midpoint on NQ to possibly continue higher. And then for ES, our midpoint is going to be at 55.50. If we can remain above 55.50 on ES, we'll have room to come back up towards 55.85. But again, those are with 50-50 odds. So if those setups are to be executed, we'll have to inch those stops quickly and really lock in, just an account that there possibly may not be continuation again, because the fact is, as long as we are in between the floor, the certainties lie within either a breakout or a breakdown. Let's have a solid trading week ahead and let's see what we get. Cheers.